To begin with, let's understand what do we mean by cloud computing. Let me open up the slide. So guys, is my screen visible to you? All right. So this is the first slide for our AWS training. And after completing this module, you should be able to define the concept of cloud computing, understand the cloud computing services and deployment models, describe AWS global infrastructure and its benefits, categorize various services in the AWS, and also start working with the command line interface and the GUI management console. So these are the objectives that we would be covering up in our session today. And obviously, we won't be able to cover up all those things in a single session. Now, before moving to AWS, those who are completely new on the cloud, we should first understand what do we mean by the cloud computing concept and why there is so much buzz around cloud computing technology, why people are or the organizations are migrating their infrastructures on the cloud platforms. So, as the name suggests, cloud computing, what do you think about it? What is the understanding? So I'm sure everybody would have read about cloud computing, probably searched about cloud computing on the internet, in the magazines, articles, you must have read about it. So everybody talks about cloud computing these days. But what is the understanding with respect to this technology? Anyone? Just put it on the chat window. Let's try to make this session more interactive, right? Uh, the cloud is basically a collection of computing resources. So when we talk about a cloud computing, so you just have to break this word. Computing stands for the computational power of a machine. Now, when we talk about a computation power of a machine, it is primarily we are talking about the servers, the hardwares, and the storage aspect of an infrastructure. Now, computation can be anything. So even the calculator does the computation task. The laptop does it. Desktop computers does it. Mobile phones does it. So anything which has the capability to do the computing or the computation and is available over a network. So that means over the internet or the public network. So that is what is called as the cloud computing. So cloud stands for a network. It can be a public network, mostly the internet. And the computing means the infrastructure which has the computational capabilities that is available to the people over the internet. So that is a very basic and a fundamental definition of a cloud computing. So here in the diagram, you guys can see there, that the cloud is a collection of computing resources which are accessed over the internet. So computing resources can be anything. As I mentioned, it can be PDAs, mobile phones, uh, laptops, even if you talk about a data center infrastructure, then it can be servers, routers, switches, firewalls, and storage devices. all of them, if they are available over the internet, so that would be considered as a cloud computing. To understand in a very basic manner, so you guys are taking up a session right now. So I've been sharing I am right now sharing my screen, and that screen is visible to you guys. So we can communicate. You can even take a control of my screen if I give it to you, and you can even do the task, whatever you want on my system via a remote access. So that is also a kind of a cloud computing platform that we are accessing. So I, who is sharing the screen, becomes a cloud computing vendor. So I am sharing my screen right now. You guys are accessing it. So I become a cloud computing vendor. And for me, you guys are the users. So that is what the very basic fundamental, uh, you can say, definition of a cloud computing. Now, when we go at a broader aspect, so when we talk about the enterprises or at a higher level, uh, then we talk about mostly the bigger cloud platforms like Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure. So these are some of the cloud platforms that we know, and they are, you can say, one of the biggest cloud platforms in the market. So let's move on. Now, the next thing is, why do we require cloud computing? So now earlier we got to know, okay, what is cloud computing? Now, why do we need this technology? Now, earlier what used to happen before cloud computing, the organizations used to have their own infrastructure, the data centers, which we call, right? And there were a lot of issues while managing the data center. There was cost involved in it. A lot of manpower was required. And for the organization who is not into the technology domain, who is not into providing the technical services, would have to manage all those infrastructure. So let's assume that you have to set up a data center for your company, and but your company is into a marketing or financial sector, which is not into a main technical domain. But still, there is a dependency on technology. So you have to first need to have a facility, right? And so you have to procure a facility. You have to procure the infrastructure, which includes the servers, hardwares, and the related devices. And after procuring that infrastructure, you have to integrate it together in order to make it running. And when you do the integration, you would need a staff to do that. And after that, you have to deploy the applications, softwares, and once it is ready, then you need to do the maintenance or the operational task for the infrastructure. Now, so many tasks you have to perform while setting up a data center and maintaining it. So that becomes a cost to the company because it is not going to generate a revenue for them. So this is one of the reasons that the organizations are now moving into the cloud platform. So why cloud computing? So traditionally, we were following the data center approach, but that has a lot of issues in terms of setting up, managing it, and all. But that is something which is excluded in when we use the cloud computing platforms. So no tension, no hassles of managing the infrastructure when we use the cloud. We don't have to procure the infrastructure. The system is already ready. It is on demand. And whatever infrastructure remotely you are using, you pay for that. So let's say if I use for one day, so I pay for 1 day charge only. So that saves a cost. So there is no one-time cost that is involved in it. Now let's look into what we have in the slides. So when we talk about why cloud computing, there are a lot of advantages that we have. So traditional computing companies had to spend a lot of money and time on the infrastructure, hardware, and other operational aspects. But using cloud computing, all these troubleshoots are managed by cloud service provider. So when we talk about cloud service provider, we primarily refer to AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud platforms. So you have to just focus on your main core business. Now, the cloud can provide you many services. So based on your business requirement, they can provide you the services. You just have to select it and then start using those services. The cloud-based services are basically ideal for business with growing and fluctuating bandwidth demand. So it talks about the scalability. So let's say you have to change the model for delivering the services to your clients quite frequently. And in that case, you have to scale the server, scale up the infrastructure, or you might scale down as well. So when I say scale up and scale down, it is basically the flexibility, the availability of an infrastructure whenever it is needed. Uh, so that is a very big advantage when we compare it with the cloud platforms and the data centers, because in the data centers you have already procured a particular infrastructure. So you have a limited scalability option. Let's say, for example, I procure 2 servers. So I cannot go beyond 2 servers. Whatever the capacity the 2 servers are giving me, I have to stick with them. But that is something which is not a limitation on the cloud platforms. The scalability is almost unlimited. They have a huge infrastructure setup, and whenever you need, you can scale your resources. So there is a flexibility that you get it in the cloud platforms. Now, it says cloud computing reduces the cost of managing and maintaining the IT system, right? Because you don't have to manage the infrastructure. Everything would be managed by the cloud computing provider. They have their own maintenance team. And apart from that, the basic management of an applications or the security aspect of it is something which the user can manage themselves. So that reduces the cost for the companies in terms of they don't have to uh, look for the support staff for managing the infrastructure if they are on the data center, if they are on the cloud. And when when they use the cloud, they reduces the cost of manpower, they reduces the cost of uh, upgrades and time that is lost while doing those maintenance. The cloud service provider offers resources, and using these resources rather than expensive system and equipments that you can save money for. Now, there are certain cloud computing models that we have to actually look into. So primarily, when we read about cloud computing, so basically there are 2 types of models that we discuss. One is the service model and the other one is the deployment models. The service models are further broken into many other divisions, but primarily we generally discuss about 3 service models. So that is basically infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and a software as a service. Now, what are service models? What are deployment models? Let's look into it. The service model is basically a concept where the cloud computing vendor, that means the organization who is selling the cloud computing services, how they are selling the services means how they are providing the services to their customers. And it has been categorized. And it has been categorized into many categories, but generally we discuss most broadly if we discuss about it. So there are generally three categories. You can further break it up into many other categories because there are so many small scale cloud providers that they cannot be part of all the categories of the service models. So hence we have to break it up, and then we have to distinguish a particular cloud service provider for a particular category. But when we talk about big clouds like Amazon Web Services and all, we discuss broadly about three service models. So primarily, the first service model which we have is called as an infrastructure as a service. Now, with the name, you can actually link it. What does it? What does the infrastructure as a service means? Uh, this is the most, or you can say, the basic service model with respect to the cloud computing providers, or you can say a core cloud computing service model. And it resembles almost like a data center when you access it, though it is not a complete kind of a data center access that is being given to you, but it is very close to it. So when we talk about an infrastructure as a service, it says that the availability of an infrastructure over the internet that can be accessed by the users remotely. So that is what the infrastructure as a service means. Now, this model was actually existing before the cloud computing technology was introduced. So around 2006, 2007, Amazon pioneered this technology, and they introduced this cloud computing word in the market. But before that, even when it was there was no awareness about cloud computing, the infrastructure as a service was existing. So there were organizations which were renting out their infrastructure to their customers, primarily IBM, HP, and all those companies. But at that time, it was not known to us. Now, when we talk about cloud computing, the infrastructure as a service means that the availability of infrastructure like databases, servers, hardware devices, as I mentioned, servers and the storage network, even the applications also, application servers also, which are available remotely to the customer over a virtualized platform. So obviously you cannot have a physical access to a server remotely. So through a virtualized platform, you can access it over the internet. So that is what the infrastructure as a service. And this is the cheapest way of accessing the cloud computing services, right? Now, to give you an example of the companies, the service providers, the cloud computing service providers that are providing this service. So AWS lies in all the categories of the service model. It is not primarily related to infrastructure, infrastructure as a service, but it's an example. The core company, which is primarily into infrastructure as a service, you can consider a Rackspace. Rackspace is an organization. So that is basically more into the infrastructure as a service. The next service model is the platform as a service. Now, in the platform as a service, what happens is it is the upper layers of an infrastructure that is being given an access to the end user. So you give an access of a platform rather than an infrastructure to the end users. So the platform as a service means that the on-demand environments are provided to the end user so that they can deploy their applications directly onto the cloud platforms without worrying the setup of an infrastructure, the networking aspect, the security aspect of an infrastructure. So primarily the platform as a service is most suited for those who are part of a development, those who are doing, those who are coding things, who are into the development environment, and they are not from the networking background. For them, the platform as a service is basically very beneficial in terms of setting up the environment. So how the platform as a service is different from an infrastructure as a service? In the infrastructure as a service, what happens? Uh, the cloud provider gives you the virtualization, so virtual access of an infrastructure in the form of a virtual machines, and then you have to set up, or you have to set up the environment on your own completely. They are not going to manage it for you. They are not going to do it for you. So when you have an access of a virtual machine, you have to deploy an operating system on it. So you have to select an operating system, you have to deploy the middlewares, and then you have to deploy the applications like softwares, and also you have to manage the networking and the security aspect of it. So everything is managed in the infrastructure as a service by the end user mostly. But in the case of a platform as a service, uh, most of the things are already existing. You just take up an environment, pull your code, deploy it on that environment, and start using it. So if you have an idea and you want to, and that is basically created in the form of an application, and you want to test an application, you can quickly deploy it on the platform as a service. So that is not going to take up time in setting up the infrastructure. Now, when we talk about a platform as a service, what is the best example that we can give? So obviously AWS is also part of the service model, but the best example would be specifically related to platform as a service would be Google App Engines. So Google App Engine was primarily created as a platform as a service only. Now this is deployed in a Google Cloud platform, right? Now the next and the last service model, the third service model is the software as a service. Uh, in this service model, users do not have to do anything. So as the name suggests, software as a service, that means the software is already existing on somebody's cloud platform, and it is accessible remotely to, or it is publicly accessed by everyone. So what the user has to do in that case, the user has to just subscribe and start using the services. So that's it. So software as a service delivers the software applications over the internet, which are on demand and on subscription basis. Now, what is the example? What are the examples that we can actually look into for this service model? So this service model is existing everywhere. On a daily basis, you are accessing software as a service, uh, even on your cell phones, using the social media. So if I have to give you an example, Facebook is an example of a software as a service where you just have to subscribe, provide your mail ID and the password, and start using the services. Uh, Gmail is an example of a software as a service, Google Drive, Dropbox. So these are a couple of examples primarily related to software as a service. Now, in this case, as I said, the user do not have to manage anything. They just have to log in into the link and start using the service. As we don't know about, let's say I take an example of Facebook. So we don't know about The infrastructure on which the Facebook is basically deployed. What is the application on which environment this application has been built? We are not aware of it. So that is why in the software as a service, the users do not have the visibility of an underlying infrastructure for that particular software. So these are the three service models. These are the three categories of the service model broadly. And talking about Amazon Web Services, it is part of all the three service models. So AWS provides the services in all the three service categories. Any queries, guys, with respect to the service models? Let me know. Just raise your hands. No queries? Just a minute, guys. Right. Do you have any questions with respect to the service models? All right. Now, let's move on. Now, this is not a development model. This is basically a typo. Uh, let's discuss about, this is basically the deployment models. So what are deployment models? So primarily the deployment models, there are, again, there are many categories of the deployment models, but primarily we discuss about uh, four categories of the deployment models. So first of all, we have to understand what do we mean by the deployment model. So primarily the deployment model is how the end users or the customers of a cloud provider deploy their applications or the softwares on the cloud platforms. So that is basically the deployment models are. So in which manner or in which categories we can deploy the applications or softwares on the cloud is primarily, it's basically the definition of a deployment model. So uh, the deployment models are categorized primarily broadly into four categories. So one is the public deployment model. The second is the private deployment model. The third is the hybrid deployment model. And the fourth is the community deployment model. Now, in the case of the public deployment models, it's the most widely used deployment model, and it is one of the cheapest way of deploying the softwares or the applications as well. So in the public deployment model, what happens is the cloud service provider makes cloud computing resources available to the general public over the public network or the internet. And the public cloud service may be free or offered on a pay-per-use model. So what happens in a public deployment? as per the definition, generally, let's say if I give you an example like about web applications. So you deploy, you have to deploy the web applications, and how do you deploy them on the cloud? Now, when I talk about a web applications, you can relate it with a website. So let's say if I have to host a website on the cloud platform, so I would select a public deployment model for that. The reason would be that since I am deploying a website, so it should be accessible to a general public. There should not be any restrictions to it, right? It should not be restricted. The access should not be restricted. So anything which is to be accessed by everyone wherever they are located in any geography they are located, so that is what we refer to as a public deployment. And the best example would be a deployment of a website because we don't have a restriction to it. Now, the second deployment model, that is the private deployment model. And what do we mean by it? So the private deployment models are, as the name suggests, anything which is restricted because of the security purpose. So that do not have a visibility of a public network. So no one other than an admin or those who have been given an access would be able to access it. So that is what the private deployment is. So a private deployment is kind of a dedicated services to an organization or business which have a specific security controls. And this is primarily used for the sensitive data or any application which is quite sensitive. Um, any application which is restricted for an organization use only. So that is where that is for what the private deployment is used. But it comes with a cost. Since it's a dedicated, hence it comes with a cost as well. So there is more cost in terms of private deployment as compared to the public deployment. So that's basically the two differences between, that's basically the differences between the two models, the public and the private deployment. Now, what in terms of a real-time example, what we deploy using the private deployment, since I mentioned that primarily the sensitive data, which is basically is deployed on a private deployment model. So when we talk about a sensitive data, so we talk about the databases. Because databases have the information of the customer details. They have they have a data which is very critical for the company, and that has to be deployed in a very secure manner, in a secure place, which would have a restricted access. And in those cases, we use the private deployment model. The third type of a deployment model is the hybrid deployment. So just a minute. Yeah. So hybrid deployment is basically uh, the combination of public plus private cloud, and it is a cost-effective way of deploying things. So when we talk about a hybrid deployment, we generally, it's a combination of a public deployment and a private deployment together. Now, hybrid deployments are not only related to public and private cloud. There are other definitions to this deployment model as well. So first, let's discuss about the public plus private deployment using a hybrid deployment. So when we use this kind of a definition for a hybrid deployment, we talk about a cloud native approach. A cloud native approach is basically means that every application, every information or a data set is available on the cloud platform. So a public deployment that is done on the cloud, the private deployment that is done on the cloud is what the cloud native means. So you are not using a data center along with it. It's 100% cloud computing platforms that you are using for your solution. So when we talk about a hybrid deployment in the cloud native approach, we talk about the combination of public plus private cloud. Now, where exactly you can use this kind of a deployment models in a real-time example? So we saw that we have basically looked into that the public deployment means anything which is accessed by general public. They don't have any, it doesn't have any restricted access, and primarily we deploy the websites or the web applications over it. Now, when we discuss about a solution, so let's say I am deploying a website, but the website doesn't, that is basically not only a single thing that you have to deploy, because website needs to have an integration with the database also. For example, there are some inquiries coming on the website, they have to be stored somewhere. So in the backend, they would be stored on a database. So that means the databases and the web applications has to be integrated together. But where do we set up a database? We set it up in a private cloud, in a private deployment model. Websites, they are deployed on a public cloud, so it has to be integrated. So that means it is a combination of a public plus private deployment model. So the entire solution would be considered as a hybrid deployment. And that's what we say. A hybrid deployment is a combination of public plus private when we talk about a cloud native approach. The other definitions of a hybrid deployment are, let's say there is a data center for a company and they have decided to migrate partial services to the cloud. So they say that, okay, let's migrate our websites or the applications on the cloud, but the databases, we want to keep it in our data center because it's a sensitive data. Now, anything which is migrated on the cloud has to be integrated with the data center because the database is lying there. And when we do that integration, that means a combination of a data center and a cloud provider, a cloud platform. So that is called as a, that is also called as a hybrid deployment. So that is also a definition of a hybrid deployment, though it is not a cloud native, right? The other definition of an hybrid deployment would be, let's say, I use some of the services of an AWS platform, some of the services of, let's say, Google Cloud, and then I integrate them together. So that is also a definition of a hybrid deployment model, right? Now, the last deployment model is basically the community deployment model. And you won't see this kind of a deployment model widely. But to give you an example, the community deployment is basically the broader view of a private deployment. It's a broader definition of a private deployment. Right. So when we talk about a community cloud, what is the real-time example we can give? And the best example which I can think of is of the example of, let's say, a university. So a university creates their cloud platform in a community cloud, and they say that this cloud can be accessed by the university and the affiliated colleges within that university. So any student, any resource which is part of uh, that college or the university can have the access of the cloud resources. But other than that, nobody would be able to access it. Um, for example, some of the SAP or the ERP platforms, so they can be deployed in a community cloud model. So this is one of the examples of a community deployment. Now coming to the part of AWS. Before that, if you have any questions with respect to the service and the deployment models, let me know. Just raise your hands. No queries, guys? All good? Right, guys. So let's continue it. Continue with the AWS platforms. Now, with the introduction to AWS, AWS is basically the largest cloud service provider in the market, and it has the most basically the market cap of an AWS is highest. So most of the Fortune 500 organizations are part of, they have these services applications running on the AWS. And this is the company which pioneered the cloud computing approach, cloud computing technology as well. Now, AWS is basically, as per the definition in the slide, it is a secure cloud service platform that offers compute power, the database storage, content delivery, and many other functionalities that help the businesses to scale and grow. Uh, the technology of an AWS is implemented all across the globe. So it has the data centers all across the globe at every continent. And all the data centers are integrated securely over a private network. So with that, it gives you the redundancy as well. Now it provides not 90 plus services, it provides more than 130 plus services. And they keep on adding up the services continuously. Just a minute, guys. Right. So with the usage of the AWS, it charges you on a per hour basis. So whatever the services that you are uses, you will be charged on a per hour basis. And there are other uh, pay models that you can actually look in for, which gives you more discount rates. Uh, when we talk about the market survey of AWS, so this market survey of an AWS is of 2019 data. So you can actually look into the latest data from a Gartner's report for 2020. But when we talk about 2019, when we talk about the market survey of an AWS as per this slide, so it has around 61% of the organizations, the markets that is using the AWS as of now, and 16% of them are experimenting on the AWS, and 7% of them are planning to use. And it's a huge market capitalization. Um, the other cloud providers like Azure, and Azure is performing good, and they are also leading. They also have the good market share, um, but they are still lagging behind the AWS. Apart from that, the rest of the cloud platforms in the market, they are nowhere in the competition with the AWS as of now. Now, what happens with, let's say, if about AWS and the other cloud platforms. So the other cloud platforms, when you work on it, you will see, or you will have basically, if you have worked on the AWS and then you start working on Azure and the Google Cloud, uh, you will you basically think that all the cloud platforms working is almost similar, because the other cloud platforms actually followed the AWS. So AWS introduced the technology, and then the other cloud platforms actually developed their platforms in order to compete with AWS. So almost all the cloud platforms working is similar. It's just the interface, the looks of the platform, and the name of the services are a bit different, but the end results is almost the same. So that's what we say, that if you learn any of the cloud platforms, the other cloud platforms becomes easier to work on, right? Apart from that, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, these are more public cloud providers, and the rest of the other cloud platforms like IBM, Oracle, they have a very less market share. They are primarily more dominant in the private cloud market. Now IBM has their public cloud also. Even Alibaba is also having a cloud, but they are having a very less market share. Now, when we do a service comparisons of AWS, Azure, and GCP, so almost, as I mentioned, that the platforms are almost similar. The name of the services are different, but the end result is same. So to give you some of the examples, we will be discussing about these services one by one. But to give you an example, let's say if we talk about a storage service where you can store your files on the cloud. So that is basically a service on the AWS, which is called as an S3. So S3 stands for Simple Storage Service on the AWS, where you can store your files. So similar service on the Azure is Blobs and Files, just the name is changed. And on Google, you have a Google Cloud Storage. So that's what, if you can, basically you become an expert on one of the platforms, the learning on the other platforms becomes quite easier. Now, when we talk about a global infrastructure of an AWS, so what is an infrastructure? It's just like a data centers only. And these data centers are basically available across every continent. So when we talk about an AWS terminologies, these data centers are um called as the availability zones, and multiple data centers combined together are called as the region. So a region is a place. A region is basically a terminology on the AWS where a group of data centers in a close location are combined together. That is what we call as a region on the AWS. So let's say if I take an example of India. So in India, we have a region called Mumbai. And in Mumbai, there are three availability zones. Availability zones are nothing but the data centers. And these three availability zones are integrated together over a private network. Combined, they are called as a region. So we call it as a Mumbai region. So here you can see it is mentioned two, but now they have recently added the third one also. So this would be a Mumbai region, and within that region there are three availability zones, right? Uh, if you see the example of US, so in US there are so many regions, and within that there are multiple availability zones as well. Now, why there are at least two or more than two availability zones in a particular region? That is to provide the redundancy. That is to provide the failover and the redundancy. So in case if one of the availability zone goes down, then you can basically access or migrate to the other availability zones quickly. Uh, so in order to give you a redundancy, minimum two availability zones are required. Here you can see in particular region, one availability zone is mentioned, but that is also planned to uh, increase another one quickly. Now, the circles in a green are basically where the new regions are coming up. So this is basically Middle East. So this has arrived. In Middle East, you have a region now. So they have added some few regions recently as per their infrastructure. So with the addition of new regions, AWS stands the AWS infrastructure is largest in the market as compared to the other cloud platforms. Right. So we should be clear about the region and the availability zone before working on the AWS. So region, as I said, is a place where the multiple availability zones are combined together, which are basically the availability zones which are closely co-located, combined together is what we call as a region, right? And what are availability zones? They are nothing but a data center where the infrastructure is lying. So when we talk about an AWS global infrastructure, primarily we discuss about the region, we discuss about the availability zones and the edge locations. So edge locations are what? Edge locations are basically related to caching the results, and this edge locations we would be discussing more on when we will use the AWS services. So right now we don't have to discuss it in depth, but broadly you can understand the edge locations are primarily used for the content delivery, faster content delivery to the customers or the end users. So edge locations are with AWS, and also for some edge locations the AWS is tied up with the other service providers, right? Any questions, guys, with respect to the global infrastructure? Just raise your hands. Any queries you have? No one? No questions? All good? Right? Okay, good. Right, so here you can see Mumbai with a region, Mumbai a region with the three availability zones. Now, there are so many regions, but you would be wondering that where exactly I should be working, which region I should be selecting. when I start using the AWS? Should I be using Mumbai or I should be using any region in US? And the first thing that would come in your mind would be that, okay, any region which is nearby my location, which is closer to my location, I should use that one. So that is actually a correct approach, but it is not always correct. So let's say if I'm using AWS for my personal use, and I would obviously look into for the nearest location from my place, because that would reduce the latency and that would increase the performance of an access. But there are other factors also that you have to select while working for an organization. So while using the AWS for an organization or deploying a solution. So one of them is a nearby location, that is correct. And the second thing is with respect to the cost. Now it is not a uniform cost. So all the regions, when you access the services on the AWS, it is not that you are going to get a uniform cost for that. Let's say I use a US region, a particular service in a US region that charge me around certain cents per month, per hour, and that would be same in case if I access a Mumbai region. No, though there will be a difference of a very, you can say a very minimal difference that would be there, uh, but when you calculate the overall cost, that makes a major impact when you run it 24/7. So that makes a major impact. So ideally, the costing also plays a very important role in terms of selecting a region, which region you should be selecting. And it is observed that most of the US regions are the cheapest. Now, what is the reason? That is something which the AWS can let you know. But what I think is that because this is an organization, this is a US based company, and because of the tax structure and implementation of a data center, the US regions are more cheaper for this organization, because they have to outsource their, so they have to set up, let's say they have to set up an infrastructure in any other continent, so they have to go with the taxes of that country, managing the support staff and all those things. So it adds up the overall cost. So that is what the perception is. What is the exact reason? That the AWS can let you know. But US regions are the cheapest one as compared to the other regions. And mostly the regions in South America, even the region in Asia Pacific, primarily Sydney region, they are a bit expensive. The region in India, Mumbai, it is into a mediocre level. So that is not relatively that much costly if you compare it with the other regions. So the cost plays a major role in terms of selecting a region. Then latency plays a major role in selecting a region. And also the other aspects of selecting a region are from where exactly your customers would be accessing your applications. So let's say if you are having a business which can be accessed, mostly your customers will be a US based people, then you should be selecting a US regions to deploy your applications, so that you can provide a lower latency, a better delivery of services to your end users. So that is a couple of examples to select a region for. Now, before going for with the further slides, let's look into how do we access the AWS. So right now you can see on the screen the AWS console, and this console can be accessed by multiple ways. But how do we reach to this console? Let's look into it. So let me sign out. So what you have to do is on the internet, you just have to type AWS console. Let me show you that. So let's say I go to Google and here I would type AWS console. So that gives me a link to access the AWS console. So only prerequisite for the cloud platforms, primarily the AWS, is you need to have a good internet connectivity, right? So here you have to select an AWS management console. A management console is a GUI based web console, and most of the tasks you can perform over the web console. As I said that apart from web console, there are other ways also you can access the cloud platforms. So primarily using the CLI, which is the command line interface, and using the software development kits, SDKs, you can access the cloud platforms, this AWS cloud. But primarily, when you target the AWS Solution Architect Associate training, you primarily work on the management console. I would be showing you how you can access the CLI, and we will be putting up some commands also there. But primarily, you have to work mostly on the web console when you prepare for the Architect Associate certification. Now, to access this console, the first thing you need to have is your account. So you have to click on AWS Management Console. And here you have to click on sign into the console if you have an account. Otherwise, you have to sign up. Now, when you do a sign up, if you are making an account for just working on the cloud for a testing purpose, experimenting it, you should use a free tier subscription. And you need to provide your email ID, obviously the password, and you have to provide your number, phone number. It would ask you to provide your PAN details. You don't have to, it is not necessary to provide the PAN details. And it is going to ask you whether you are using this account for your personal use or for your company. So whatever you are using for, you can select that. The other thing is that when all the details you provide doing a sign up, you have to provide your credit card details also. Even the debit card also works, but that has to have the payment gateway as Master or Visa card, Visa gateway. So if you have a debit card with a payment gateway as RuPay, so that won't work. Now, when you provide your credit or debit card details, that doesn't mean that they are going to deduct an ECS on a monthly basis. No, they are not going to do that. They are just going to verify your details using your credit card. And they are going to charge you 1 rupee from your account, and that is also refundable. And once it is authenticated, your account will be created. So once it is authenticated, you would have an OTP pin also generated. You have to provide that, and then your account will be created. Uh, it takes around within 24 hours to get the access of the services. For some, you may see that instantly the access is provided, and for others, it can take less than 24 hours to get that activated. So what you guys can do today is you can, after this class, you can log in into the console. So you can access the console and then do a sign up, create an account and do a sign up. So I already have an account. So I would click on sign into the console. Those who are having an account, they can just click on sign into the console. Now, quickly, let me show you how you can actually create a new account. So what you have to do is you have to click on create a new AWS account. So it says AWS accounts include 12 months of free tier access. And here you have to provide your email address. You can provide your Gmail IDs or any other ID. The password, confirm password, and the account name. So this account name will be reflected whenever you sign into the AWS console. And after that, when you click on continue, they are going to ask you some further details like date of birth and all, right? So this is a 12 months of free tier account, and free tier means it doesn't mean that everything within the AWS would be free of cost. There are some services that are free of cost, but for a limited time period. And some of the services are chargeable. So if you create an account and let's say if you try to explore yourself, so be careful because some of the services are very expensive. So when you run them, after that just stop and so that you would not be incurred with the extra charges, right? So that is the first thing you have to do after the session. You should create your account on the AWS console. Now I'll sign in using my details. So I'll click on sign in to an existing AWS account. And here I have my account with the username and I'll put a password. So pretty straightforward to access the AWS. So here you have an access of an AWS and all the cloud services of Amazon Web Services. So whatever you need to perform, any activity you want to perform on the cloud, you can do here. Now, how do you work on this interface? So right now, when you see the screen, it is a bit confusing. So where exactly to go, what needs to be done? So the main thing what you need to do first is that when you see at the top right corner, you have listed as, you can see Ohio. So this is basically a region which is being selected. So when you click on it, you have the availability of the regions. Now, let's say if I have to move from a region, Ohio, to any other region, I just have to click on it. That's it. There would be no changes in the interface. The interface would be absolutely same. It's just that the region would be changed, right? Now here you can see there are so many regions that you can select based on your requirement. And there are some more regions that are also available, but they are not available in the free tier account. So for us, it is more than sufficient to work on. Now, here you can see in the US, you have US East, North Virginia, Ohio, North California, Oregon. In Africa, recently they have added in this Cape Town, South Africa. And in APAC, you can have in Hong Kong, Mumbai, Seoul, Singapore, Sydney, Tokyo, and likewise. Right. So let's say if I have to move from Ohio to Mumbai, so I just have to click on it, and then here you would see the region as Mumbai reflected. Now, how to select a region? So one of the factor would be the latency and how to calculate a latency from your location to those regions. So there are many tools that are available on the internet. One of them is the cloudping.info. So what we'll do is we'll try to calculate the latency of those regions from my location. So you can open up a link, Cloudping info. Sorry, Cloudping info. So this was a third party. This is a third party tool which is primarily developed to calculate the latency of all the AWS regions. Now, how does it work? It initiates a ping request from your system to all the AWS regions. It broadcasts it, and based on the response, it calculates the latency. And this latency varies. So it is not that all the time the latency will be fixed. And what you need to do is you have to actually look into the relative latency. So whichever is giving you the lowest latency, that becomes the best region for you in terms of selecting. Uh, so what you need to do is you have to initiate an HTTP ping from your system. And here you get a latency information of all the regions. So let's wait for it. So which region you can see a latency less? Let's say if I select Mumbai, so Mumbai gives me around 125 ms latency from my place, and this will be absolutely different for others. So for those who are out of India or at any other location, you may find a different latency. So that's what. Now, if I initiate an HTTP ping again, uh, the latency information will be different. So Ohio is providing me 1210 ms, which is quite huge. All right. So that is fine. 287 ms, that is fine. And Singapore is giving me less, 177 ms. So here you can see that now it has changed. So earlier I was getting around 125 ms latency. Now I'm getting around somewhere around 287 ms latency for Mumbai location. So that keeps changing. That is fine. So what we will do is, so one way to select a region is the latency, and the next way is to select based on the cost. So considering a cost, I would keep it on the US regions, and I would keep it on Ohio, right? Now, the next thing is with respect to the access of the services. So what you need to do is you have to click on the services section here. So when you expand it, it lists all the available services on the AWS cloud. So you can calculate how many services are there. So there are more than 100 services that you are going to get. And every service is basically categorized into a function. So there are some categorization, there are some services which are basically related to a specific technical function. For example, if I talk about Internet of Things, so that's a separate technology. And for IoT, there are so many services that are available on the cloud, on the AWS. Now, we don't have to cover up all these services because some of the services are related to specific function. And as per the AWS Solution Architect Associate training, we have to cover up the essential services. The essential services that are required to build a solution, to create a solution on the cloud. Now, here you can see some of the services with respect to Internet of Things, with respect to the machine learning. So these are some of the things that we don't have to cover. We will only focus on more. We will only focus more on the essential services. So primarily, we would concentrate more on the compute section, and also in the compute, we will focus more on the EC2. So this is basically a service which is called as an elastic cloud compute, and from here you access the virtual machines. This is the most widely service. This is the most uh, used service on the AWS cloud. So, because from this service only you create the virtual machines, and it has many other features when you access the service. Apart from that, we would be covering up the section in the storage. We will be seeing what all storage services we have. We will be covering up databases. We'll be discussing on the network and content delivery, primarily related to the security aspect of it and the networking aspect of it. And also, we would be discussing on security, identity, and compliance, primarily the identity access management. Some of the management and governance services we will be discussing on. We would be discussing some of the services with application integration, AWS cost management, customer engagement, and apart from that, we would be discussing on end user computing, some of the services in end user computing, and some of the services in the analytics. So this is what would be covering up in our session with respect to the architect associate training. Right. So this is basically how does the AWS looks like and how do you access the services on the cloud. Now what I'll do here is I'll give you an example of how you can actually create a virtual machine on the AWS. So I would follow some steps and then I would give you uh, basically I would give you the steps how you can access that particular virtual machine. So I'll do that quickly just to give you just to let you know that how you can basically run a virtual machine, access it, and what is actually the usage of an AWS cloud. And then we will be covering up step by step what does a particular functionality means. So I would select with a EC2 service first, and as I said, from the EC2 service you can actually create a virtual machine. So what you need to do is you have to first click on the EC2 service. So our dashboard windows appear when you select an EC2 service. So what you have to do in this service is the first thing you need to look into is the service status of a region as well as the availability zones. Now, where do you find when you click on the dashboard, you scroll down, here you get the service health, service status of the regions. So I'm in the Ohio region right now, and in the service status, I have Ohio, US East, and within that region, I have three availability zones. Now, what are these three availability zones? These are the data centers, and the service status gives me the information that all of them are working normally. So there is no outage as of now. Now, what are these symbols represented? You can look into in the service health dashboard. So this service health dashboard actually lets you know that what all services on the cloud are working normally, what are which services having an outage. So if I open up this dashboard in a new link, so you get the status of all the services that are running on the AWS. So in the service health dashboard, you can see here, these are the services in the North America region, and all of them are primarily working as normal right now. If there will be any upgrades or outage, that will be presented here, right? So that becomes a quick check. So you can, whenever you are accessing any region or a service, you can do a quick check from a service health dashboard. Or if you face any outage in your program or an application, you can actually quickly look into if was there any issue in a particular availability zone or a region. Now, to launch a virtual machine, now the virtual machines on the AWS are called as the instances. And how do you launch it? You just have to click on a launch instance. Just click on it, launch instance. If you have an account, you can do that parallelly with me. Now to launch an instance, obviously you require an operating system also to be deployed. So you can bring your operating system images. Otherwise, you can select the operating system images that are available on the cloud itself. These operating system images are in the form of an Amazon machine image, which we call as an AMI, right? So AMIs are basically a templates that contains the OS configuration or the software configuration. You can basically create your own AMIs also. Let's say if you want to bring your own OS, if you want to bring your OS images, or you want to bring some softwares on the cloud, uh, or specifically on the AWS, you would need to convert them in the form of an Amazon machine image templates. There are ways to do the conversion. That is something which we discuss mostly in the AWS professional certification, not in the architect associate training. So while launching an instance, the first thing is that you have to actually select an Amazon machine image. In the quick start window, you have the list of most widely used Amazon machine images, which are available as a free tier. So when we talk about a free tier eligible, it is basically that the AWS doesn't charge you for the usage of that image. They don't charge you for running this image, right? And there are a list of OS that are available. So here, if you see, if I select Microsoft Windows Server 2009, it is not available free tier. So if I use this image, they are going to charge me for the usage of this image. So I'll show you an example of launching a Windows instance as of now. So I'll select a Windows server, and I'm going to select a free tier image only. Let's select Windows 2012, this one. So I selected this AMI. So what it is going to do in my virtual machine, in my instance, it is going to deploy Windows 2012 as an operating system. Now it says with respect to 2012, there are certain instances that are not available. A free tier one. So let me go back and select another image. So instead of 2012 SQL, let's find if I can get only 2012 R2. No, I don't have that. Okay, let's select 2016 base image only. Yes, click on next. Right. So for this image, I have a free tier instance available. Now, what all these instances are, these family of servers, the instance types are, that is something I would be explaining you later. Right now, I would just show you how you create a virtual machine. And then later, I would explain you step by step what does these instance types means, right? So I would select right now t2.micro free tier eligible, and then I would click on the instance details. So keep it default as of now, no changes to be done. And add storage, keep this as default as well. Add tags, no tags needs to be added. Security groups, create a new security group, review, and just click on launch your instance. The instance needs to be accessed using a key pair. So you have to create a key pair. So I will create a new key pair. I'll put a name to this key pair. Let's say I put something like Ohio and download this key pair on my system. And then launch the instance. So it takes a couple of minutes and I have my virtual machine created, and this is provided with an instance ID. So this instance ID is by default assigned by the AWS. So you just have to click on this instance ID, and on the dashboard you will see a Windows machine initiated in a running state. So you have a Windows machine running, and it has been provided with two set of IPs. One as a public IP, which you can find it here, associated with the DNS name, and an internal private IP, right? Now, how do you access this Windows machine? So I have my instance created, I have my virtual machine created, but I have to actually access it. So how can I have an access? So what you need to do is, let's wait for it to initialize. So to connect to this instance, you just have to click on connect, and you can download the RDP file. Otherwise, you can open up an MSTSC from your system and put an IP address, the public IP address. So let's say if I download this RDP file on my system, so I have this RDP file available. I can put that, I can save it on my system for a later use. And for this instance, the username is already provided by AWS, which is administrator. And the password I have to generate. So what I have to do is, first I would open up this RDP image, and it is going to ask me for the password. So click on connect. And here it asks me for the password. So I have to generate a password from this link, and the authentication would happen based on the key pair that I have downloaded when I created the instance, right? So click on get password, and here you have to select a file which is ohio.pem file. It is in the encryption format. So click on select key, click on select file, and that should be in the downloads. I have this PEM file here, ohio.pem. Open it up. So it gives me the password in the encrypted format. Just click on decrypt password and copy to clipboard. Close your window. Now you have an RDP opened. Here you just have to paste the password and click on OK. So when you do that, it allows you to connect to the instance that is running, and then it allows you to log in into your Windows machine. So let's wait for the Windows to appear. So here you can see, so we are accessing a remote of an instance which is running on the AWS, and in a minute's time we can access a Windows server. So if we would have to do that in the data center, that would have taken some time. So this is your Windows machine, and let's wait for the details to appear. Now, good thing about these instances are that it gives you the internet connectivity as well. Though usability of an internet, they are going to charge you for the network in, network out. And this is a very fast network that is being provided by the AWS. And it depends on the type of the server that you have selected. Uh, um, right. So here at the right side, you can see the host name, the instance ID that you are accessing, the public IP address of the server, the private IP address of the server, the type of an instance you are accessing, which availability zone this instance has been launched. The architecture is powered by AMD. The total RAM memory is 1 GB, and the hard drive that you get it is somewhere around 30 GB. So if you want to see, you can go to the C drive. And you get it somewhere around 29.9 GB, which is also scalable. So this 30 GB of hard drive is almost free of cost. So they don't charge you for the for this 30 GB. But when you increase more than that, they are going to charge you on a per GB basis. So this is the Windows 2016 remote that you are accessing. And let's say if you want to access internet from this machine, you just have to open up a browser. You can download Google Chrome from here, Mozilla Firefox, and browse it. And apart from that, you can put your applications, you can create a database on these servers. So what kind of a service this is? This is primarily an infrastructure as a service that we are accessing. This is a virtual machine that we created, and This is a virtual machine that we created, and over that, the operating system has been deployed. And apart from that, let's say if you want to deploy any application or a database, so that is a full control that is given to you as an end user. So it gives us around 260 Mbps internet speed, which is low to moderate, uh, as as per the type of an instance that we have selected, right? So let's go out from the instance. Now let's say if your task is done and you don't want to access your instance now. So what you can do is you can click on the action and then click on the instance state. Here you can stop your instance. So when you stop your instance, then the billing stops. And when you restart it again, the billing initiates, right? So once the instance is stopped, you would not be charged for the usage of the instance. So right now we are using a free tier, so 750 hours are available for us. And I would be explaining you later with respect to every terminology that we have basically selected when we created the instance. So that was just to give you a basically a look how we can create a virtual machine on an AWS, how we can have an access, and what is the, actually a use case. What is the usability of this cloud platform? Any queries you have, guys, let me know. So we have 10 more minutes to go. Let's take up the Q&A. If you have any questions, let me know. I have one hand raised. Let me unmute you, or you can put it on the chat window. Let me unmute it. Yeah, Krishna. Do you have any questions? Just put it on the chat window if you have any questions. I think you are self-muted, so you can unmute yourself. I have unmuted from my side. Anyone else with any questions, let me know. So whatever questions that are coming in your mind, you can ask. So we do have a participation from India, or there are participants from other countries also? I am not able to have a chat, guys. Are you guys not putting on the chat window the messages? Let me put a message on the chat window. I have broadcasted my message. Just acknowledge if you can view that. So in the upcoming sessions, we would be covering up the EC2 instance, and I would be explaining you about the details of an EC2 instance that we have selected while creating a virtual machine. So right now I have created a Windows virtual machine, and tomorrow I will be showing you how we can create a Linux machine, and then we'll run a basic application on those servers and view them. Apart from that, we would be covering up the concept of the other features that we can add with the EC2 instance service. As I said, that this is a very important service in terms of creating the solutions on the AWS cloud. I hope you guys have the list of syllabus with you. You can find it on the faculty site. I still can't see any message from you guys on the chat window.
Hello,
Yeah, hi Jacqueline.
good morning.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
I'm from Philippines.
All right, good.
Hmm.
So what time is there in Philippines right now?
11:25 a.m.
11:25 a.m. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any queries?
Yes, I am chatting in the chat box, but it seems like you can see it.
Yeah, I cannot see any message. So I just have to contact with the administrator. That's why I'm not getting the messages. Yeah. You can
So
put
I
your
just
query
want,
here. Let me know.
hmm I just want to ask the difference between block storage and object storage.
That is something that we would be covering up later when we'll do the storage section. But since you
Okay.
have asked a question, basically the object storages are used where when you put your objects or files that are available on your system onto the cloud. Let's
I
say if you have some PDF files, some documents that you want to put it on the cloud, some photos, images, snaps, or any video file. So that is something, an object, which you can put it on the cloud. So that is the object storage used for. The block storages are basically used as an hard drive to a server. So assuming that you have a laptop and a laptop has a hard drive attached to it. So similarly, when you create an instance or a virtual machine, you attach a block storage to it, which is basically acts as a hard drive to a server. So that is a prime difference. Block storage is not where you put your files, your objects into it. That is primarily put on the object storage. The block storages are basically assigned to a server, which acts as a hard drive to it. Right? Fine, guys. So if you don't have any further questions, let's wrap it up. And tomorrow same time, catch you up. So catch you tomorrow at the same time. And the tomorrow's agenda would be we will be discussing in more detail about the EC2 service on the AWS cloud. Right? So fine, guys. Till then, take care. Bye for now.